I was in Romania studying when Igor got beaten, so they broke all his ribs. I assume that Igor got beaten up because of the money lender, Kamatar, profession, and then gave up this profession to study and work as a waiter in Italy. And if some former friends or family members they come in contact with other countries or organizations/activists and say all sorts of dirty things about me, you need to know that 99% he/she is part of the Russian network in Moldova, and the question you have to ask him, why didn't you leave Moldova with him and he left alone? I did not return to Moldova for 11 years, and even if they left, they would go to rest or work and return to Moldova, but they would never be forced to be persecuted by the Russian network in Moldova. In 2016, when I was studying in Romania at the law school and at the Master's program in Analysis and Conflict Resolution, and Igor Mokhinu studied as a waiter in Italy, he also worked as a waiter. I remember exactly that moment. I was in a laundry, buanderie, it was close to the Krangasi subway, and I was talking to Igor on Skype, and I said to him, "Wait a minute," to get the clothes out of the washing machine, and the headphones stayed in my ears. And he was talking to a girl without realizing that I was still listening. That was when I realized that the individual had been recruited by the Russians to destroy me. Yesterday, this Igor was following me. I had scheduled a meeting at UNIC a week ago. I was at the intersection on Tiana Street with Stefan Selmayr, and I was heading to UNIC. When I noticed Igor, he changed direction and went to the traffic light to cross Stefan Selmayr Street to August 31st, 1989 Street. I kept going in my direction to UNIC, and I see Igor following me without crossing the street. I stopped in front of Mold Telecom, and Igor started running to the trolley bus station, without crossing the street. I remembered the events that took place in front of the Varzari bar, which today is the pharmacy, and across the street is the Linella store. In vain did the Russians invest in him, Igor Mokhinu, because he was still stupid and scared, smiley face. Update/February 25, 2022. It's no secret that electricity comes from Transnistrians. As long as Ukrainians fight heroically with the Russians, and as long as the Russians have not reached them, Transnistrians will be very nice. Once the Russians reach them with military troops, Transnistrians will demand either union with Russia or recognition of independence. We must be careful in the Gagauzia area too. For Moldovans, it is enough to turn off their electricity and turn off the gas, and the Russians have won the war with Moldova. Are the Moldovan authorities ready to receive electricity from Romanians? Is Moldova ready to receive gas through the famous Iași-Ungheni pipeline? Update February 26, 2022. Putin needs to win this war against Ukraine, otherwise he will be a political corpse, both figuratively and literally torn apart by his own system and by the Russians. The biggest fear for him is being considered a loser. He will have the contempt of the police, the army, and the intelligence services. That's why he will use all the resources to win, including weapons of mass destruction. Without allies, Ukraine will fight heroically, but it is not enough. They have the advantage of defending their country and know their territory. In a country where almost every Ukrainian will have a weapon, the fight of the Russians will be difficult. With sophisticated weapons from the West, it will be even more difficult for the Russians. Let us say that all of Ukraine's leadership is annihilated. Will they continue the fight? Most likely yes. Every day of occupation will be a nightmare for the Russians. I think the idea of distributing weapons to all Ukrainians is brilliant. In the case of a mobilization of Moldovans, it would have been great to share all the weapons. I believe that the Moldovan authorities should also prepare to receive Romanian-speaking refugees from Transnistria. This is only in case the Russians will stop on the Dniester, but considering that the southern part of Moldova are Ukrainian territories with access to the Black Sea, I think they will take these territories with Gagauzia and stop on the Prut. That's why Transnistrians are nice, so as not to be caught between the Moldovan and Ukrainian armies. Update/February 28, 2022. The Russian army can mobilize up to 1 million soldiers, but to do so now is difficult and you need time to make this mobilization. Russians hope that if they occupy Kiev together with the country's president, the fighting will stop and go to negotiations. Will Ukrainians give up if the president of Ukraine is captured and Kiev conquered? It's a very difficult question to answer. I am sure of one thing, that the Russians will not have another chance to conquer Ukraine and that they will not leave Ukraine as a loser. They want to conquer Kiev as soon as possible, and the president must retreat to another city in western Kiev to continue the fighting. The Russians also need time to mobilize new resources. They have a problem. Western technology is far superior to Russian technology, but even with the military technology that the Russians have, they can destroy entire cities in Ukraine. Are Ukrainians ready to pay such a price? Ukrainian soldiers are prepared for such a price, but not Ukrainian politicians. The Russians want to reach the Dniester, and for that it is necessary to capture the president of Ukraine and conquer Kiev. They will try to bring their people to the helm of Ukraine. They will try to bring their people to the helm of Ukraine, and Ukrainian nationalists will be destroyed/arrested by the FSB. Some nationalists will flee to EU countries. NATO cannot get involved in this conflict, but they will most likely send volunteers to the Ukrainian Legion. Guerrilla warfare will be more possible in cities, but due to new technologies it will be harder to fight on the plains, even in the mountains. The Russians have the experience of fighting in the mountains with partisan Chechens. Eventually everyone will be found. They will take over the families of the partisans and they will simply destroy them. The Russians will forgive Putin if he brings them victory. If he loses, he will simply be destroyed. Putin is now playing his career and life. If he wins, he survives. If he loses, he is arrested or killed, so he will use any method to win. It is possible that Kiev will liberate the separatist regions. They could do that too. The Russians will not have another chance to win Ukraine. Unlike Georgia, which also fought the Russians heroically, Ukraine's advantage is that they are neighbors of NATO and EU member states, and the chances of becoming members of these structures are very high. If Ukraine wins the war with Russia, no NATO or EU member state will oppose Ukraine becoming a member of these structures. Ukrainians are sympathetic to everyone because of their fighting spirit against the Russians. The morale of the Ukrainian soldiers is much higher than that of the Russians. When the Russians defend their country, they also have a high fighting morale, but now they are invaders. I want to continue to insist on creating a professional army of the Republic of Moldova as soon as possible. We need at least 50,000 professional soldiers from the Republic of Moldova. We are a neutral country like Switzerland, but Switzerland has a professional army and is considered one of the most powerful armies in the world. The fact that we are a neutral country does not mean that we cannot have a professional army. Every Moldovan has seen what is happening in Ukraine, and the fact that the Russians have not yet reached the Dniester is due to the Ukrainian military. There is no Moldovan citizen who will oppose the salary increase of 5 or 10 times for the Moldovan military. If we do not feed our army, then we will feed an occupation army. I believe that all private security companies in the Republic of Moldova should be transferred to the administration of the Ministry of Defense of Moldova, and also Moldovan police officers should be given instruction/training with military technology. I also ask that the state institutions of the Republic of Moldova ask the development partners of the Republic of Moldova to receive donations in the form of money/technology as soon as possible. It's just a matter of time before the Russians attack Moldova. Neither the Republic of Moldova, nor Ukraine, nor Georgia can become a member of NATO or the EU, and those who signed such petitions are demagogues. You can't become a NATO or EU member when you have occupation troops and separatist zones. You have to be a fool or a Russian diversionist to come up with such statements. In the case of Ukraine, it is clear that they are at war with the Russians. In the case of Georgia and Moldova, you must do the following to become a NATO or EU member: to renounce the separatist territories and recognize their independence. Ms. Maya Sandu, I want Moldova to be a member of the EU and NATO, but in addition to political PR with such statements, you put gas on the fire. We are waiting for the moment. I am trying to explain Putin's next steps, and that doesn't mean I am on the side of the Russians. From my point of view, the Russians only simulate these peace treaties that take place in Belarus. They usually demand a ceasefire in order to rearm and remobilize and never keep their promises. Putin will have no other chance to stop Ukraine, and in my view it was Volodymyr Alexandrovich Zelensky's mistake to sign the application for Ukraine to become an EU member. You can become an EU member when you have occupation troops in your territory. I, Plop Andrei, want Ukraine to be a member of NATO and the EU, and I wrote about it, but now Putin will justify his gesture in front of his generals. You see, the Ukrainians want to join the EU and I was right. We will not have another chance to conquer Ukraine. You see that all NATO members are arming the Ukrainians, and if we leave Ukraine now, it will become a NATO member. From my point of view, if the Russians withdraw now, they will lose Ukraine forever, and the Russians will mobilize all the resources they have to conquer Ukraine and also fix the mistakes of the analysis of the state of the Ukrainian army. Update/March 1st, 2022. You can be an expert on the ex-Soviet space without being able to speak Russian. You can be an expert on Arabic if you don't speak Arabic. The same is the case with China. The fact that some people across the prut know history very well, that doesn't mean you can consider yourself an analyst. In Romania there is only one person who understands the position of Russia, and that is Armand Gosu. The rest of the people are good historians or kitchen analysts. I beg to be spared the banal comments from the brethren across the prut. We all have the right to an opinion, but spare me to have an even greater contempt for analysts in Romania on the ex-Soviet space. Congratulations to the Americans for helping Moldovans, some pro-Russians, win the Moldovan leadership to get rid of other Moldovans, also pro-Russians. They intentionally do nothing to defend Moldova and to surrender Moldova to the Russians without any fighting. They intentionally do nothing to defend Moldova and to surrender Moldova to the Russians without any fighting. Those from the Moldovan government don't even try to say that, we didn't know. Volodymyr Alexandrovich Zelensky does not leave Kiev because the Ukrainian soldiers are fighting heroically with the Russians, while the Moldovan leadership will not leave Chisinau because they have an agreement with Kozak. Update/March 2nd, 2022. I want to remind you that on February 14th I wrote an article in which I wrote that we need a general mobilization and a professional army. Even after the President of the Republic of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, yesterday demonstrated to the Security Council a strategic map with the territories of Belarus, Ukraine, Russia, and the Republic of Moldova, on which red arrows are outlined, one of them pointing to the Transnistrian region. But even after everyone saw the strategic map of the President of Belarus, the Moldovan leadership still does nothing. How much could be done from February 14th until now? Update/March 4th, 2022. I want to remind you of the post I wrote on March 1st, 2022. Now Tiraspol is asking the international community to recognize its independence, after Maya Sandu signed the application for EU membership. We have a team of Russian diversionists at the helm of Moldova, because only some Russian diversionists could act like that. Do nothing to defend Moldova and come up with actions that only benefit the Kremlin. All hope for the territorial integrity of Moldova will be owed to the Ukrainian military and not to the Moldovan military or the Moldovan leadership. If the Ukrainians do not face the attacks of the Russians, all our hope of having an integrity state with the borders of Moldova that we know today may be the last time we see them. Because Kozak's whores from the Moldovan leadership will either do nothing to defend Moldova or will mobilize only when it is too late, and even if they mobilize, they will make it so that the men cannot leave the country so that the Russians can come to the gate and take us exactly as in July 1940. Either we will be killed or arrested, or they will force us to side with them and work for the Russians.